Welcome to the Plume and Page. Today's story is Dr. Know-It-All. Once there was a peasant, and he was very poor. All he had in the world was a patch of woodland, a two-wheeled cart, and a pair of oxen to pull it. From time to time he chopped down some of his trees, cut them up into logs, and carted them into the village. If he was lucky enough to find a buyer for the wood, he would sell it for $2 a load. One day, this peasant Fish, for that was his name, took his oxen cart full of wood to the village and sold it to a doctor. While Fish was standing at the open door, waiting for his $2, a powerful smell of rich, savory food reached his nostrils. He peeped in at the door. There was the doctor's dinner laid out on the table, all steaming and ready to eat. Soup and roast, juicy vegetables, a frosted cake, and a dish of luscious fruit such as peasant Fish had never even laid eyes upon before. "Oh," thought the poor man, "if I could only be a doctor too, and eat such heavenly dinners." This set him thinking. After the doctor had given him his $2 for the wood, the peasant lingered in the doorway, twirling his cap this way and that. And at last he asked whether he might not learn to be a doctor also. "Well, and why not?" the doctor said to him. "It's easy enough." "And how would one go about doing that now?" asked Fish. "First of all," said the doctor, "you must sell your 2 oxen and the cart. With that money you must buy some fine clothes. You must also buy a few medicine bottles, pills and capsules, salt, salves, and so on. Next, you must get yourself a book. One of those ABC books will do, the kind with the picture of a rooster inside. And last of all, you must get a board with the words 'I am Dr. Know-It-All' painted on it, and you must nail it over your door." Fish did all this. Over his door hung the newly painted sign. In his room was a shelf full of medicine bottles, and on his table was the ABC book. He himself was so fine and grand he felt like someone new. With his spectacles, his long-tailed coat, his watch, and his pointed beard, he really looked as if he knew it all. He was ready to start, but day after day went by and nothing happened. There he sat among his salves and pills with not a thing to do. At last someone came, and a lord no less. This lord had been robbed of a big sum of money, and when he saw the sign 'I am Dr. Know-It-All,' he said to himself, 'That's just the fellow I want. If he really knows at all, he will surely know who has stolen my money.' He knocked at the door, and when Fish heard him, he straightened his spectacles, gave a pull at his watch chain, put on his tall hat, but took it off again, and at last opened the door. "So you are Dr. Know-It-All?" said the rich lord. "Oh, yes," said Fish. "I want you to find my stolen money," said the lord. "Can you come with me now to my palace?" "Yes, indeed," said Fish. "And my wife Gretel, may she come too?" "Certainly," said the lord. So they all stepped into his coach and drove off. It was the dinner hour when they reached the lord's palace, and he invited Fish and Gretel to join him at the table. They all sat down, and when the first servant came in with a dish of soup, Fish whispered to his wife, "Look, Gretel, that's the first." He meant that this was the first course being served, but the servant, who had overheard him, thought he meant this was the first thief who had stolen the lord's money. As he really was one of the thieves, he became worried, and when he reached the kitchen he said to his fellow servants, "Things will go ill with us, now that this Dr. Know-It-All is around here. Just think, as soon as he set eyes on me, he told his wife I was the first thief." The other servants gasped in alarm, and when the bell tinkled for the next course, the second servant hardly had the courage to go into the dining room. But what could he do? It was his turn to serve. He tried to look innocent as he entered with a dish of steaming food, but Fish leaned over to his wife and whispered, "See, Gretel, that's the second." He meant this was the second course, but the servant thought that he himself was meant, and his knees knocked together as he rushed back to the kitchen. When the third servant came in with still another dish, it was the same. Fish nudged his wife, whispering, "And that, Gretel, is the third." The third servant, his hair standing on end, set the dish on the table and dashed into the kitchen as fast as he could. Luckily for the thieves, the lord had noticed nothing, for he had been too busy thinking up some way of putting Dr. Know-it-all to the test. And now he said, "Doctor, here is the fourth servant with a covered dish. If you really know it all, you should be able to guess what is in the dish." Poor peasant fish! How should he know what was in it? He looked and looked at the covered dish, and at last, seeing he was caught, he said, "Oh, you poor fish, you're done for." As luck would have it, there was a fish in the dish, and the Lord cried, "Well, well, doctor, you've guessed it. Now I know you can find my stolen money." He was in a fix, the peasant fish, and no mistake about it. He was still racking his brain for something to say when the fourth servant, who was just leaving the room, winked meaningly at him. Fish excused himself from the table and followed the man into the kitchen. The servants, looking greatly frightened, said, "Oh, doctor, you told your wife we were the thieves who stole the Lord's money, and it's true. But we'll give it all back to him, and we'll reward you besides, if you'll only promise not to tell on us." Fish promised to keep their secret, and they showed him where the stolen money was hidden. When he returned to the dining room, he cleared his throat and stroked his beard, saying, "So you want to know what becomes of your money, my lord? Well, I have to consult my book about that." He sat down and spread the ABC book on his knees. Then he put his spectacles on his nose and, with an important air, began to look for the picture of the rooster. Meanwhile, the servants were curious to know whether Dr. Know-it-all would really keep their secret. So the fifth servant was sent in to listen. He sneaked in on tiptoe and hid in the oven. All this time, peasant fish, or Dr. Know-it-all, whichever you wish to call him, was still flipping pages back and forth in his ABC book, but he couldn't find the picture of the rooster. At last he tossed his temper and shouted, "You rascal! I know you're in there, and I'll find you yet." The servant who was in hiding thought that he was the rascal. He jumped out of the oven yelling, "Hurrah! The man knows everything!" Dr. Know-it-all, who had found the rooster at last, looked pleased, closed his ABC book, and cleared his throat again. He said, "Yes, well. And now as to your stolen money, my lord, I can show you just where it is." He led the lord to the place where the servants had hidden the money, saying, "You see, my lord, here it is, every penny of it." The lord was pleased, so very pleased, in fact, that he grabbed a great handful of gold, pressed it into Fish's hands, and said, "Well done, my good doctor, and my undying thanks to you. I will spread your fame far and wide." This he did, too, and from that time on, Fish and his good wife Gretel lived in wealth and ease, had plenty of good food to eat, and rode about town in a fine carriage.